What's up guys, it's McNulty here. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are all doing well. So we have 2 days left of the Raid Up Summon. Well, 2 days and 3 hours left. And we have another hero in the portal that we haven't actually had a good look at yet. And that is my boy Merlin. Now, I was lucky enough to pull Merlin. I just want to answer that question for those of you who are thinking about it, whether or not it is worth going for Merlin as well as Guinevere in this summon. Like, what is he going to add to your team? Is he going to increase your ability to tackle those difficult, tricky bosses going forward in the dungeons and everything else? So we're going to have a closer look at Merlin today. I want to kind of keep things as they are in terms of how you would pull him. We're not going to focus heavily on chivalry and things like that, but just to get a good overview of this hero. So here he is, my boy Merlin. And you know what? He looks kind of interesting. Like, I always saw Merlin as an older dude in all of the, movies and things like that I've watched from back in King Arthur's day. And actually reading over this information, it does give you a sort of explanation. So he's an archmage who served in the House of Pendragon for centuries, is what it says. His powers are so great, he's rumored to have been born from the union of a human woman and a demon. Weird. Though he typically takes the appearance of an old man, he also is known to transform into a young man or an animal, it says. No idea what animal he's supposed to transform into, but it says his tremendous powers cause him to be regarded with both great reverence by many and extreme suspicion by others. So there is a little bit of backstory in terms of what we've got with Merlin. Now, as far as what type of hero he is actually a support hero, believe it or not. So he's not really there to deal damage. He's not really there to be a tank. He's mainly there to be a support. But that's the thing about Merlin. He does have a few other things in his kit which do make him pretty good in other areas. So let's start off with the basics. So he gets a leader effect, which activates in all battles, and he grants all allies damage taken reduced by 10%. So damage reduction, pardon me, as his leader skill is super strong. Any damage you're taking is going to be reduced by 10%. As you can see, he's a support skill, so he equally increases stats in the order of those most necessary to support allies first. So if it's defense, he's increasing that. If it's attack, he's increasing that. And he is part of the Steed family, and he does enjoy the daytime. He enjoys the sunlight. Even though he's a bit pale and pasty from the looks of him, he does actually enjoy the sunlight. And interestingly, we'll see with his passive, he can actually switch things up to where that plays in his favor. So in terms of these heroes, if you haven't already got it by now, the passives are the bits that cannot be changed. So those are these 3 skills that we're looking at here. Each hero gets 3 passives, or each legendary at least gets 3 passives. So Merlin is no different. So the first of his passives over here is Clear Morning. So when using his skill 2, while his current HP is 50% or higher, he will change the weather to day. So straight away, you're getting that advantage. You want to bring in heroes with him who also like the sunlight. There's quite a few, heroes like Kay, for example. You've got heroes like Guinevere as well. They enjoy the sunlight. Guinevere is more squall, but then you get quite a few heroes that deal a lot of damage that he can support that enjoy the sun as well. So he changes the weather to day, and he charges +5 vigor. That's a full vigor charge for himself. So he uses his skill 2, he's automatically ready to go again, okay? That's when he uses this passive. He uses it right at the beginning of the battle, or the first time that he casts his skill 2. He removes all debuffs, damage over time, and abnormal status ailments from allies, so a full cleanse. Not just from abnormal status ailments, but also from damage over time and also from debuffs if you have any on your team. That is super strong. Now remember, this skill can only charge twice per battle. It can only be used twice per battle, and there is a cooldown of 8 turns on this skill. So if you use the skill right at the beginning, you need to kind of count it out so that you wait until you use this skill again, because there's quite a lot going on with it. He's cleansing the entire team. He's getting himself an extra attack, and he's changing the weather to your favor as well. So you want to wait until the opportune moment to actually use this skill. At the beginning of the battle, absolutely fine. But further on, you kind of want to wait. Now, skill 2 is pretty strong for him, as we'll see in just a second. His second passive is called Fiery Avenger. So this is even, like I said, it doesn't matter which is the relic that you're using. He comes with the Frost relic, the one that you can see over there in his hand, the Lunar Fang. But it doesn't matter which relic you're using, the passives are still going to stay the same. So when using skill 3, so this is the second passive, he grants all allies defense increase 2 for 2 turns. And he also grants all allies recovery over time for 2 turns. Recovery on time is where the target recovers 5% HP each turn. So that means that when he casts his skill 3, he's going to trigger this passive, which is going to give your whole team defense up for 2 turns and recovery over time for 2 turns. Now, I said I wasn't going to really talk about chivalry, but it's a good place to mention that with his chivalry 1, so if you already have a copy of him, you summon another copy of him, he gives a recovery over time for the whole duration of the battle. It's not 5% per turn, it's only 2% per turn, but it's still super duper strong. So he is a healer, even though he doesn't seem like a healer. When you cast your skill 3, you're going to be granting this recovery over time, and that can keep your allies alive for the duration of the battle. Let's move on to his third passive. So passive number 3 for him, when using skill 3, while the current HP is 30% or lower, he grants revival, 60% of max HP to all dead allies. This is strong. He is literally the only hero in the game that we have at the moment who is a reviver. This can only trigger once per battle, and it only triggers when his HP is 30% or lower. So when he drops below 30% HP, he will bring everybody who's died back with 60% HP. That is super strong, and it can definitely win you some battles. So that is not to be forgotten about. But again, it can only trigger once per battle. Just to recap on the second passive, that one, there is a cooldown of 3 turns on the defense reduction and recovery over time, but there's no limit to how many times you can use it. There's a limit on the first passive, there's a limit on the third passive, but no limit on the second passive. So I hope that all makes sense so far. Let's go ahead and we will look at his skills. So these we're going to go over, like I said, just with the Frost relic. I don't want to sort of go into the other relics because it is super hard. If they're not available to farm in the shop, it's not something I want to focus on right away because you're not exactly going to be chasing them at the moment. So his first skill, this one actually is the same for all of the relics. He attacks one enemy 3 times with a total damage of 84% attack, which is not huge because actually he doesn't really have a very good attack stat. So if I bring these figures up here on the screen, it's just under 2,000 attack. I mean, to give you an idea, somebody like Morgan has like 2.5k attack. Some other heroes have much higher attack than him. So he's not going to be hitting super hard at this skill 1, but he is going to be hitting 3 times. And that is super important because you've got initially in the early stages when you're farming the dungeons and even a bit later on with Penveed, you're going to want to hit him multiple times to be able to take down that barrier that he puts up. And this is where you're going to be able to do that. Now, he also gets a 35% chance to inflict freeze for a single turn. Freeze is just going to make it so that no action can be taken during that next turn. And that's just going to apply to that single target that he hits. But it is still a pretty decent skill. But what I would say, skill 1, you're really mainly just using it. It's not triggering off any of the passives that we just mentioned. You're just sort of using it to break down barriers and shields and things like that, or to charge up vigor if you really need it. You probably should put a vigor set on this guy, just by the way, because you want to be operating at skill 2 and skill 3 for the majority of the time. So let's move on to the interesting one. So skill 2, he's going to attack one enemy 4 times. Total damage, 240% attack. That's a pretty sweet amount of damage actually. And he gives 100% chance to inflict frozen remains for 2 turns. This is a strong skill. So there's quite a bit to it. We'll open it up. So it says he grants, when hit, grants damage taken decreased to the attacker for 1 turn. So it means that you are going to reduce the damage that's incoming. He also grants damage over time immunity to the attacker for 2 turns. So any damage over time skills, burn, freeze, whatever else, poison, etc. These skills cannot inflict damage over time effects on this target. So he grants this to the attacker, it says. So that is going to be anybody on the team who attacks is going to trigger this effect. The way he does it is like as a debuff. He puts it on the enemy. So when you attack after he's cast this skill, you're going to be giving yourself damage reduction and damage over time immunity. So it's super duper strong, works really well with other damage dealers. He also gives a 50% chance to recharge the attacker's gauge by 30%. And that's what's so strong about Merlin, is that he makes it so that the rest of your team are going to be able to charge quicker and fire faster at a higher vigor charge, because we're going to charge our attack gauge. It means we get more turns. So skill 2 is really, really good for Merlin. It's kind of where you want to live with this guy. I would mainly set him up to skill 2, but again, you really want that passive that he gets with skill 2, but it can only be triggered a couple of times. So you do want to make use of his 3rd skill as well, because remember, this passive, it triggers when using skill 3, where he gives recovery over time, and also this passive where he gives the revival also triggers when he's using skill 3. So when he gets below 30%, you want to use his 3rd skill, and that's when he's going to trigger the revival. Hope that makes sense. So skill 3, what is it? So he attacks all enemies 2 times for a total damage of 144% attack, 55% chance for the last hit to inflict freeze for a single turn. So again, there's not a huge amount to this one. Like I say, that's why I say skill 2 is probably where I would prefer using him more, because as a supportive hero, that passive really kicks in, and the rest of the skill really gives the rest of your team that damage reduction and that support that they need. But when you need that recovery over time, and when you need that revive, that's when you're going to be triggering off skill 3. So it may be a bit of a case to where you kind of manual skill 3, or you use it where you set it up to preferences skill 2, but skill 3 could be the secondary preference. So I mean, it's a pretty decent amount of attack, but again, the main focus here is going to be where he's now triggering off the defense increase and the recovery over time, and granting the revival. So I mean, he's a pretty straightforward, pretty simple type of hero, but actually he's really, really good support. And especially like I said before, to focus on that, reducing the damage and giving damage over time immunity can be super duper strong. And that recharging of the attack gauge, getting it to where your heroes are firing off quicker. Now, it's not to be confused with attack gauge reduction. So somebody like Morgan will pair really, really well with Merlin, where he grants that that increase on your attack gauge. Morgan gives the attack gauge reduction to the enemy. It just makes it to where your team is firing off a lot more. So as a support hero, he is actually really, really good. He's not that great as a primary damage dealer, but he definitely will serve you well, I would say, from early to mid game. Even at the late game stages, although I'm not quite there yet, I've seen people using him to good effect. So I think Merlin to me is a really good hero to have. He's definitely worth pulling for. So if you do have your 60 summons saved up, my advice is going to be go for it. Honestly, I think that you won't regret it. And yeah, let me know how you guys feel Merlin performs. So that is pretty much everything that I've got to say about him. I hope that you guys have enjoyed the video. I hope it's given you a bit of something to chew on with Merlin. And obviously we'll probably get into the relics if he is ever featured in another rate up summon or dungeon like Guinevere's had. But for now, that's literally everything. So if you enjoyed the video, please do subscribe to the channel, drop us a like as well, and let me know in the comments your thoughts on Merlin as well. So I wish you guys everything of the best. Take care, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye for now.